Hi, my name is Kelsey Jean-Baptiste, and this is the first episode of Turilla Talk. Turilla Talk is a journalistic discovery through critical movements for change. But before we get into this first episode, just a disclaimer. Any views or opinions represented or expressed here do not necessarily reflect the position of Turilla Talk. Any content provided by guests are of their opinions and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individual. Now let's get into this first episode. I had the opportunity to sit down with Chivona Newsome, the co-founder of Black Lives Matter Greater New York. She's a civil rights leader, and she's running on the Democratic ballot for New York's 15th Congressional District. Let's take a look at what she had to say. So could you share with us what the phrase defund the police means in your opinion, and why you think this topic is important to focus on instead of just police reform as a whole?
Well, about roughly going on 2 weeks ago, we had a huge Times Square rally where we unleashed the blueprint. And in this blueprint, it called for, of course, police reform, defunding the police, demilitarizing police, and a 9-point legislative package, because not one thing is going to stop systemic oppression. It's been deep-rooted in our history for about 400 years. But to me, defunding the police means, let me give you an example. I reside in New York City. So in New York City, the budget is $6 billion for the police. Okay, they have tanks, they have militarized weapons, they have all these things, and kids don't have books in the Bronx. Like, they don't have enough school books. Communities are without the resources that they need. So defunding the police, for me, of course, I want to get to the point where we no longer need policing, and there's something called Black Opportunities, which is an off branch of Black Lives Matter Greater New York. But in the interim, while we still have policing, what we need is to remove some of their budget. And we need to give that to gun violence interrupters, people who do the work on the ground, mental health, de-escalators, people who are skilled in that. Allocate those resources to our schools. And also, we need to remove, while we're talking about schools, we need to remove guns from our school system. We need to end the school to prison pipeline. The way that they're currently treating public school children is like their baby is baby Rikers Island. That's what's happening. So defunding the police, for me, is removing some of their budget, giving them an operational budget until we can get to the point where we abolish police, but reallocating those funds. That's what it means to me.
And something that you touched on that I think led really great into my second question was the money is going to get allocated into different entities and services. What are some of those services do you think that money or that budget cut can be given towards?
Especially our education system. If $425 million of that very large budget they have goes into our school system, maybe in places like where I'm from in the Bronx, we wouldn't have a 90% college dropout rate. We would no longer have a 60% high school completion rate. Then wouldn't it be wonderful if some of that money went to CUNY schools who are currently laying off adjunct professors whose students can no longer afford to go there? So that's one thing. Education, I want a whole bulk of that money to go there. But also social services. We need mental health clinics. We need resources for our community. Or even if, I don't care if you pull some of that money and take it to affordable housing. Because when you're out here on the ground and you're talking to people, what's your biggest problem? Their biggest problem is that it's insecurity and where they're going to sleep and where they're going to live.
Amazing. And there's this idea that maybe could defunding the police abolish this law enforcement system?
Well, I'd be very happy about that, in honesty, because you have to think about the history of policing and why it still has these harsh effects on Black people. Last year, 235 men were killed, 235 Black people were killed by law enforcement around this nation. Now, we have to think about the Fugitive Slave Act so people can understand why we've never had this happy-go-lucky relationship with the police. Because it's one thing to say, oh, they view us as aggressive, or oh, they dislike us, but it's a why. What's the root of that? Under the Fugitive Slave Act, law enforcement officials were used to capture Black people who look like you and me and take us back to our slave owners. So with the relationship starting like that, it's no way that we'd ever have this cohesive, happy, and warm and fuzzy relationship. Now, until we get to the point of abolishing police, I think what we need to talk about also is demilitarizing the police. They should not have tanks and weapons. Secondly, getting rid of police unions. They have a lot of control over our government. So you wonder why, like, I'm a candidate for Congress who has not taken any PAC money, any endorsement money, but other candidates, if you look into their donors records, you'll see that PBA has endorsed them. That's New York City's police union, or it's happening around the whole country. They've attained so much power that they fund our elections. So the people that we represent and who represent us and we send to office, they have no power because they're already bought by the police unions. So we need to dismantle them. Another thing about getting rid of policing is you'll see is, say if I was an officer, right? And I was terrible here in New York. I just went around brutalizing people and macing everyone and beating up Black and brown people. I can go to another state and get a job. Right now, we need a registry. We need a licensure. So if you lose your license to be a law enforcement official in any state, you can never work in that profession again, the same as it is with the hairstylist, same as it is with any other professional who has a license, because they jump around from state to state. And you'll see, if you look in some of the big cases of police brutality, these officers, these terrible men, have gone on to get another job someplace else. Another important thing is that will stop people. Now, I'm paraphrasing, but Martin Luther King said something to the effect that we can never make people love us, but we can have laws that will protect us. Now, to break down that blue wall of silence, because we know that how they say blue lives matter, which is untrue because that's a job. You can always quit. I can't wake up tomorrow and not be Black. But what we need to do is officers who falsify police reports, right? Because that happens a lot. If you speak to any municipality, you'll see that happening. Officers who falsify a government document, which is a police report, they need to be tried. They need to be tried in court. They need to be indicted, and they also need to lose their pension. Now, when you take away someone's liberty and you take away their ability to provide for their family and send their kids to college and build a new porch and swing set in the back of their home in the suburbs as far away from the communities they actually patrol, then you'll see a change. There'll be no blue law of silence. It's like, hey, buddy, I know we're pals, we're blue living it up, but if you lie in a report and I cover for you, I'm gonna lose everything. I don't think anyone's worth. I don't think their brotherhood is worth losing everything and losing their liberty. So that's something that needs to be enacted on a federal level.
There are some that say, from the articles that I've been reading, that if we abolish this police system, that crime rates in certain areas, such as the Bronx, such as Brooklyn, will rise. And so what are your thoughts on this? How do we then if we take away heavily policed areas and crime rates do go up, then what's a solution there? What's the next step that we need to do?
I think that we have to look at the root of the problem. And the root of the problem being, why is there crime? Usually crime is synonymous with poverty. Crime is synonymous with proximity. So you have tons of people living on top of each other who have no other resources, who are unemployed, because no matter what the U.S. government's unemployment rate is, it still affects Black people and brown people the most. So we would have to treat those ills first, and then we see a decrease in crime. Now, say if we brought in all new jobs, if we allowed some corporations, or if we enabled our small businesses, which are the backbone of America, to thrive and grow, then we also were using gun interrupters. People had better educations. Like, how many PhDs in master's degree people do you see engaging in crime? I don't know what the statistics on it. I'll look it up after this call, but my gut's telling me it's pretty low. People like that usually disengage. So if people had higher incomes and better education, and they lived in quality housing and shelter, and the only thing they didn't have, because what you have, like, I grew up in extreme poverty, right? And the only thing that we had here in the Bronx was our respect. And that was truly it. You pay the rent with the light bill, as Jay-Z would say. So maybe we gave people another way to find their respect. If we empowered people, we led people with economic development, free healthcare, and all those like social kind of programming, we will get to the point of not having police. When we see that other communities police themselves, and it works out really, really well. They have their own ambulances, they have their own schools, they have their own patrol people, and crime is down there. So why couldn't every community around this nation monitor it like that? But what I feel like is a GOP talking point is they love to throw out, and it does not exist to your viewership. Black on Black crime is complete BS. That's what I want to tell people, because that's where the rhetoric usually goes. Well, Black people killing each other in Brooklyn, and no, crime is about proximity. So if a community is Asian, it will be Asian on Asian crime. If a community is white, it will be white on white crime. White people actually commit way more crime, considering that Black people are only 13% of the population.
And that I actually got that question from one of the viewers. They asked me, why do people like to throw Black on Black crime when it comes to talking about this movement? And you answered it really well.
And I can answer it again, because it deflects from the real thing. Do you know how many press conferences I'm standing up there like, oh, Donnie Wright, the police, before we had the unfortunate murder of George Floyd, right here in New York, an officer by the name of Garcia put his neck in a Black man's put his knee in his neck, harmed him, beat him up, and it looked pretty similar. Luckily, Donnie Wright is still with us. But I'm there, I'm giving a speech, I'm like, oh, liberation and police brutality, and a reporter goes, well, what about the Black on Black crime in Brooklyn? Like, no, we're talking about the people who are paid to protect and serve us, who live off of our tax dollars, harming us. I do not see the correlation. And it's to deflect. And these MAGA wearing hat people come out to our rallies and they try to antagonize us and they say the same thing. It's just a GOP and white supremacist talking point. It's bullcrap to stop you from thinking about and addressing the real problem.
So this also leads into my next question is, are there other options other than defunding the police? Are there other things that we can do that can make it tougher for the police instead of cutting their budget?
Well, the falsifying the police reports is one. The dismantling of police unions is another one, and holding police accountable. Because of course I want for the defunding of it, but we have to hold police accountable. Say if me or you or any one of our viewers, if there was video footage showing that we murdered someone, we'd be in these nice shiny little silver bracelets and we'd be sitting behind a cell. There would be no long investigation, no long trial. Oh, you know what? You can't do your vlog or your talk show anymore. You can only do desk duty at your offices. It would not happen. I think it's important to hold police accountable the same way we hold everyone else accountable. And I still want them to be defunded, though. I want to throw that in there.
I like how you added that at the end.
I had to sneak it in.
And my last question for you, I want to talk about your run for Congress. What is your platform and your plans in regards to economic liberation and social justice in the Bronx and greater New York area using the Black Lives Matter, you being the co-founder of it? What's your platform?
Well, my platform is my life's work, and it truly, most of it came from being on the ground and speaking to community members. I am one of the first people in my race, which is in the South Bronx. Please get out and vote. Early voting's opening. And you can see all my platform issues on Chivona, NewsomeForCongress.com. But I believe in universal basic income, because you've seen, and I was petitioning for that before we got the first set of relief packages happening here in America. My community needs that all the time. We live in dire poverty. Our median income is only $28,000 a year. So I went around and polled people and asked them, how did you feel about universal basic income? That's one of the things that Martin Luther King was working on before he died, in eradicating poverty. I also believe in federally funding schools. So not only, as we talked in lengthy detail about defunding the police department, it's the responsibility of the United States government to educate our kids. Right now, my school district that I grew up in the Bronx is District 9. Their lack of books, there's no technology. It's really bad. But you go down to District 2, which is on the Upper West Side, which is an affluent, predominantly white neighborhood, and they have so many books, they're giving it away. I believe in the legalization of marijuana, because as we've seen with mass incarceration and how many of our family members and loved ones have records and spent jail time, and now it's okay for corporate America and white people to benefit off of that. I also believe in universal healthcare for all, because as we see from the COVID crisis, we absolutely need it. It shouldn't be tied to your job having health. Right now, I'm running for Congress with no healthcare, if I'm going to be completely transparent. I believe in environmental justice, but the thing that I love about say the Green New Deal and the Green New Deal for public housing is to bring, and it ties into economics, is I want to train people in the Bronx with greener jobs. So I've done extensive research and spoke to people from the community of urban farming. That'll kill someone. As I'm talking to you, that sound you hear is literally a massive DOT truck putting tons of pollutants in the air. And this is nonstop here in this community. So putting up some greenery, training people in NYCHA to install new energy sources, because we're closing up our major power plant upstate, which doesn't work, and we need a new source of energy. So we're going to have solar farms here We're going to have wind turbines. And it's happening out in Baltimore that you can train regular everyday people to do this. Enabling small business owners, because that would keep people in the community. You shouldn't have to travel into the city to do work. And by doing so, that means when you hear WMBE, that means women and minority and women business owners. But sadly, as we've seen from the COVID crisis, and which I knew a little bit before that, is people in our community do not have access to the resources to start a business. So yes, I want to flood the Bronx with a ton of money. I hope to be on the Appropriations Committee. That's who actually controls the money in Congress. And I want to level the playing field because equity is a myth, right? But our community has been redlined and denied access. So all the things that are accessible to a white kid in a suburban neighborhood, that's what I plan and intend to, and I promise to do here in the Bronx.
I just want to give you the floor for 2 seconds to just say, how people can get involved in Black Lives Matter or when people need to get out and vote.
Thank you. Well, if you are in the South Bronx, because our district spans from the very tip up to Fordham, shout out to Fordham University, I went there. Early voting has started. So it started from June 13th and it ends on June 21st. And then you can go out regular voting day, which is June 23rd. Please follow me. I'm probably easier to get access to on Instagram. I am a millennial. So reach out to me on the gram at New York Bonnie. That's NEWYORKBONNI. That's my IG. Slide in my DMs, but not inappropriately. And then there's also Black Lives Matter Greater New York, which I would love for you to be a part of. I see you laughing. Black Lives Matter, BLM Greater NY on the gram. And we also have Facebook pages that are on the same handles. So what we are planning for people who want to come out and volunteer with the campaign or with Black Lives Matter Greater New York, we're doing a big Juneteenth celebration with bouncy houses and jumbotrons and all that, because our community has been hurting for a long time. And the death of George Floyd, we have had the full range of emotions, from hurt to anger, sadness. I know a lot of activists need self-care. So I want to invite everyone out to the Bronx. It'll be posted on my IG page shortly. To come out and fellowship. Let's celebrate what Juneteenth is. Let's celebrate Freedom Day. Come out, eat, be merry. There's some polling stations in the area if you live around there. And be well. That's about it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for doing this. I know this was like on short notice and
I'm sitting in the car.
Thank you. I would like to thank Chivona Newsome for doing that interview on such short notice. On the next episode of Two Talk, we'll be speaking about systemic racism with Dr. Jasmine Harris, assistant professor in sociology at Ursinus College. But before I end this episode, like, share, and support. This is something that is new and exciting for me to do. Stay tuned for the next episode. Bye.